Blessed be the name of the Lord. How are you guys? Dr. Oz here, one new man, Dr. Oz, with another message. Passover 2022 is just around the corner, and we're going to celebrate Christ, as it says in the New Testament. Christ is our Passover Lamb, and he has been sacrificed. But before Christ was sacrificed, there was a foreshadow of that sacrifice, and that was the lamb eaten in the land of Egypt just before they exited, just before they were taken out of slavery. In the book of Exodus 12:8, it says, "They shall eat the flesh that night, roasted on the fire with unleavened bread and bitter herbs. They shall eat it. Do not eat any of it raw or boiled in water, but roasted." Why did it have to be roasted? Why not boil it? This may sound like a dry theological question, but it actually points to a deeper spiritual reality that we live in here as Christians in the New Testament. And the reason it wasn't supposed to be roasted is that because when you roast meat, its natural salts are retained, and when you boil it, the salts would leach out into the water and would not be in the meat. And the meat was supposed to be the sacrifice, and it had to come with salt. Yes, it was roasted so that the salts are retained in the meat, because salt has to be present in every offering. It says in the book of Leviticus, "With every offering, offer salt." Every sacrifice will be salted with salt. That's in Mark 9:49. But it comes from Leviticus 2:13, where it says, "With all your offerings, you shall offer salt." And although that law was not given yet, God wanted the Hebrews to do everything as according to his law. He wanted them to do things the right way. So the meat had to be roasted. And this is a great example how we should follow God's commandments, those that apply to us, even if we don't understand them, even if we don't really know why we should or should not do something. Well, let's suppose back in Egypt, there was a family of Hebrew slaves, and they were told by Moses, the meat needs to be roasted, not boiled. And they are sitting there in their little abode in Egypt, and just before God took them out, and they are thinking, I don't really feel like roasting the meat. I already have a pot of boiling water on the stove. Why don't I just put the meat right there and let it boil? Well, that sacrifice would not be acceptable to God if it was boiled, because it wouldn't come with salt. And does this apply to us? Yes, it does, and I will explain in a second. Jesus said, "You are the salt of the earth." Salt still has significance for us today. And like I mentioned before, Mark 9:49, everyone will be salted with fire, every sacrifice will be salted with salt. In Colossians 4:6, Paul explains that a little more clearly. "Let your speech always be gracious, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how you ought to answer each person." So what does it mean spiritually for us today? Salt is this very special ingredient. It purifies, cleanses, it preserves, and it adds flavor. And that's why salt needs to be in every offering. So you say, fine, it was in the offering of the Hebrews back then, and then in the old sacrificial system in Israel. But how does it apply to us? We don't offer animals. We don't offer lambs to God anymore, because Jesus is our Passover. He's our lamb. That's true, but our bodies are a living sacrifice to God. Everything we do, our whole lives are a sacrifice to God. And therefore our actions, everything we do, needs to be flavored with salt, so that everything we do is purified, it cleanses, it preserves, and adds flavor. So for example, you serve God. You do what God tells you to do. And let's say you go to your neighbor and you tell them about Christ, because you hear that voice of God saying to you, go to your neighbor and tell them about me. Tell them the gospel. They are lost right now. So you go, your body is a living sacrifice. So at that moment, your feet are walking you to the neighbor, and your mouth talks to your neighbor. And that has to happen with salt. Specifically, you have to tell them the whole truth about God. And if you tell them the whole truth with salt, somebody might get hurt, because the truth will set us free. But before it does, it might sting. It might hurt us. When you put salt into a wound, it will cleanse the wound, but first it will sting. So you have to tell them the whole truth, even if it's a little uncomfortable. You cannot avoid adding salt of truth, of purification to your speech. So for example, your neighbor tells you, well, is Jesus really the only way? And you might wimp out and say, well, there are many ways to God. Or if you're Jewish, you don't need Jesus. Or maybe if you do enough good works, you don't need Jesus. And that's not the truth. And if you tell them, yes, Jesus is the only way, whatever religious thing you do and however good you are, that's not going to save you. You're going to hell. And it sounds uncomfortable, but that is the salt, that is the truth. And that's why in Colossians says, let your speech always be gracious. So you have to say it in a way that doesn't come out too harsh, maybe, right? You try to be gentle, but at the same time, it has to be the full truth. It has to be seasoned with salt that purifies, preserves, and adds flavor. And when you tell them the whole truth, after hearing the truth, their lives will be purified. After they absorb the gospel, they will be cleansed and acceptable to God. And then after that, they will be preserved. Their lives will be preserved and they will live forever. Their lives will no longer be lost, going down the lost path. And then it will add flavor to their lives because salt adds a lot of flavor to food, right? And so does God. His truth adds flavor and our lives become full. We live with joy and fulfillment and a purpose, and our lives are not bland. God is not bland, just like salt is not bland in our food. So that's the reality of this commandment, that the lamb had to be roasted so that the salt must be preserved, because salt must be present with every offering, including your life today and everything you say to your unbelieving neighbor. Salt has to be there. And that's the commandment from the Old Testament about roasting the lamb and not boiling it. Happy Passover. I'll talk to you later. May the Lord richly bless you from Zion. Take care. Bye-bye.